How can schools help close the achievement gap for English language learners? And what can we do to increase college readiness for these students? Please join me for the four-part ADLIT.org webcast, English Language Learners. Hello, I'm Delia Pompa. Welcome to the ADLIT.org webcast, English Language Learners. In this segment of our four-part series, we'll be discussing trends among English language learners, or ELLs. Joining me are three experts. Kathleen Lejos. Kathleen is the president of the Global Institute for Language and Literacy Development. Kathleen previously served as the Assistant Deputy Secretary of the Office of English Language Acquisition in the Department of Education. That's a very long title. Deborah Santiago is the Vice President of Excelencia in Education, where her research is focused on state and federal policy, as well as Latino and ELL success in higher education. And finally, Susan LaFond creates and leads professional development programs for the New York State Teachers Union and serves on the American Federation of Teachers English Language Learning Advisory Cadre. She was a classroom teacher for 20 years, including 10 years as an ELL instructor. Thank you all for joining us. Kathleen, let's begin with you. Tell us a bit about ELLs. Who are these students and how large is the population in our U.S. schools?
Well, we have lots of recent statistics, and we know that there are 5.5 million English language learners, or what used to be called students who were limited English proficient, and they're in our K-12 classrooms throughout the country. The majority of the students of our ELLs are Spanish speakers. About 76% speak Spanish. That's their first language, language spoken at home. And the rest of the students in the smaller percentage category speak a variety of languages. Mandarin Chinese, Korean, Thai, Navajo, but a much smaller percentage. The other thing that we know about our ELLs is they're all over the country. And what was typically thought of an ELL either being in the high populated states of New York, Florida, Texas, or California, now ELLs are everywhere. We know that they're through the Southeast, in North Carolina, Tennessee, et cetera, so, and a really fast growing population, 10% annual growth.
Deborah, what states are we seeing the highest growth rate in for English language learners?
Well, we're seeing a lot of that growth in the South. So in California, about 11% of their students are English language learners. In Texas, about 10%. Arizona, 9%. New Mexico, 7%. So we're seeing a lot of that range in the South. We're seeing that large population. I did want to add, though, that Kathleen, there's a lot of perception that the majority of Latino students are English language learners. And I just wanted to make clear that, the data show us that 18% of kids, Hispanic kids that are in K-12, speak a language other than English at home. 16% of Asian students are the case. So while 75% of those who are ELL are speaking Spanish, it's not the majority of Latino students. So we don't necessarily equate the two, although we do see a large percentage.
Kathleen, I bet in your years of work with English language learners, you've heard a lot of myths. What are the most common misunderstandings about these students?
I think the greatest myth that we have about English language learners is that all of them are immigrant students, that they're foreign born and that they're just coming into the country and then starting school, middle school and high school. And that's absolutely not the case. I think a very revealing statistic from the Pew Hispanic Center is that 85% of our English language learners are born in the United States, are U.S. citizens, and start school in kindergarten and first grade. And of the remaining 15% of that percentage number, 52% of the kids are foreign born, but they start school in kindergarten and first grade also, and then it's the remaining 7 and 8% that actually are coming from other countries and hitting the schools at middle school and high school.
We're talking about teen readers, and Susan, I'd like to ask you, how are our middle and high school ELL students doing in school?
Well, they're of course working on acquiring English language and the content, and what's so difficult for them is the text dependency, and it's the non-fictional text where they need to read textbooks, and that's where primarily their information is coming from. And so that's very difficult for them, not having the English background, being able to understand the content through their textbooks. But they are working very hard to learn about the cultural differences here in the U.S. because as typical adolescents, they want to fit in, they want to belong, and be a part of the community.
Has our approach, Kathleen, changed over the last 30 years, our approach to teaching English language learners?
The approach to teaching in the classroom is changing, and changing rapidly, and it has changed a lot. When students used to be removed from classrooms in the past to work with an ESL teacher or certified teacher in the language area to acquire, I would say, we used to call it playground English or social and culturally relevant language, and then add academic English on later. And now what happens is that ELLs may not be removed from the classroom during core instructional time, not during math, science, reading, social studies, and literature. And so the instruction and the instructional strategies that teachers need, and this is for all teachers, content teachers, ESL certified teachers or endorsed teachers, is that they really need to be teaching language, language acquisition, and content simultaneously. So it's a huge shift.
There were some significant court and legislative actions that took place in the 70s. How did they contribute to our evolution, the evolution in how we taught these kids?
Well, I think the most significant really Supreme Court case that took place that started the trajectory is 1974 with Lau versus Nichols. And that what Lau says is that language may not be a barrier to content knowledge. That any student that speaks another language other than English that comes into a classroom not only has to acquire the language, but has to access the content at the grade level based on standards. And now we see it in full fruition. Where the students were smaller numbers and they may have been, isolated in classrooms or in sheltered programs, et cetera, et cetera. Now that they're in the classroom, what we really see is the full bloom of Lau versus Nichols, where students must be taught language and content simultaneously, and the language that supports the content. So that's how it got started, and it's our students' civil rights, educational civil rights.
That's how it got started, and so much of it since then has happened in the classroom, Susan. I would love for you, with all your experience in the classroom, to tell us something about some of your students.
I've had such a gamut of students. I've had many, many languages, the majority I do not speak, represented in my class. And I've had students from very different backgrounds. I've had students from very educated families, countries, who their fathers will come here to the local university on a leave, and they'll be here for about a year. They've had English in the past, they've been highly educated, and they acquire the language rather quickly. I've had students who come here with interrupted formal education, also known as SIFE students, and who are struggling because they don't have the prior education nor the English. So of course, to scaffold them up to where we need them to be, it takes a lot of different action on the part of the schools to help those students. I've also have students who are very motivated. Their parents are very pro-education, though they may not be educated themselves. And these tend to be families with a business or a restaurant where the student, if the student's not in school, the student will be working in that family business or restaurant. So I really have seen a large array of different students.
Diversity is the key, isn't it?
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all. This is a good start to many other conversations we're going to have. And that is the end of this segment, but our discussion will continue. Please join us for part 2 of this webcast, Building Trust with ELL Families, when we'll be discussing ways to create partnerships between schools and ELL families. You can learn more about adolescent literacy and watch the other segments of this webcast at www.adlit.org.
Funding for this adlit.org webcast was generously provided by Carnegie Corporation of New York. Additional funding for adlit.org was provided by the Ann B. and Thomas L. Friedman Family Foundation.